Stories of personal loss and disappointment arise daily from the COVID-19 pandemic. Disputes, violence, addictions, bankruptcies, and suicides are escalating at alarming rates. Restriction and isolation are affecting millions of Americans. Our cold response to loss is harmful as we chill our emotions and freeze our relationships, and those with the most need suffer alone. All this occurs as we attempt to normalize the absence of our human connections. Grieving loss in a healthy manner is critically important to our well-being. Unfortunately, we're often told to do otherwise, and the results are damaging. If our grief remains unattended, it will haunt us for years to come. Grief's answer to COVID-19 is much different than what's been occurring. This 5-part video series highlights the damaging responses we've adopted during the pandemic. It reveals how a healthy grieving practice enables us to grow and thrive through our losses. Learn healthy strategies and practical ways to better respond to daily events, find meaning through your losses, and begin moving toward contentment and optimism.
Hello, thank you for watching. I'm Daryl Powers, and today I'm hosting the 5th of our 5-part series called Grief's Answer to COVID. This is our final session, and so far it's been really a great experience for everyone involved. And I know from our encouraging responses that people are very pleased that we are really hitting this target. It's a topic that needs to be covered, and we're doing our best to cover it well. Throughout this series, we've considered many circumstances surrounding the COVID-19 experience and compared healthy grieving practices to some of our cold responses to what's been occurring. We've highlighted the differences between isolation and restriction and closing ourselves in, and compared that with outreach and connection and community. The difference is vast and the consequences are powerful. In week 1, we talked about damage caused by bypassing our grief, dismissing our losses, and certainly when we do that to others, and the harm and the damage it can cause. In week 2, we heard from Lori from SOFA. She talked about how drug addiction and relapse is just ravaging our communities, even to the point of suicide. It's a really difficult situation out there, and a lot of people really need help. In week 3, we covered what we need to do when we need to dig deep after experiencing a loss. We heard from Tom Ginn from Life Empowered Institute about how to express and discover gratitude in our lives every day and the power that can have for us. And last week, Melissa Minkley shared with us the power of rituals and ceremony and the importance of doing that. And in doing so, it gives us meaning in our losses and gives us the power to continue. So today we're covering sabotage. Why sabotage? Well, because often when we face loss, we encounter hurdles. In some cases, we place hurdles in front of ourselves, barriers and things that deter us from moving forward in a healthy way. And some of those are erected by others. But in all cases, they give us reason and sometimes even an excuse to stop or divert or dismiss. All these behaviors do damage. In fact, in April, we'll be running a program through the Grief Training Center called Roadblocks to Healing. We'll dive deep into the things that we do to sabotage ourselves and our own progress and prevent ourselves from a healthy recovery during loss. So keep your eyes open for that one. That's going to be a great program. We'll get some things set up and promote that here in March. So today, in addition to Melissa Minkley, 2 special guests will join us. They're both from Allay Healthcare and Hospice. Or Allay Home Care, I'm sorry. Allay Home Care and Hospice is a locally owned home care and hospice provider. Allay's operation canvasses the southeastern Wisconsin area, all the way down from Kenosha County up to Ozaukee, and as far west as Jefferson County, with Walworth, Washington County, Dodge County, and everything between. They cover an awful lot of ground. And Allay's care philosophy is to care for each patient and family as we would care for our own. And anyone who's had experience with Allay will certainly agree to that. Allay's website is right here. I'll put this out for you. There you go. So you can see their website right there. Please take a moment to check out some of the things they're doing and the services they're providing, particularly if you have someone who is approaching the age of a care facility or a home, or if they're in one now, Allay can do an awful lot to help. So we've got two special guests today. The first is Carrie Lindsey. She's the manager of the support care services for Allay. She's been in her role for about 10 years, and she's made some wonderful contributions to the community. And she'll share some of the things that she's done and what her team has done to be able to support families during the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll also be joined by Bethany Coats-Topel. She's Allay's bereavement coordinator, and she works closely with families grieving the loss of a loved one, and she's done a lot of her work in the area of dementia patients and dementia, and she works with patients and families there, and she has an awful lot to offer us today. She's got some very valuable perspectives, so really looking forward to hearing from both these ladies. This program is being offered by the Grief Training Center of Wisconsin. The Grief Training Center offers knowledge, resource, and community to professionals and volunteers who support the bereaved. Right now we're running live, but this program is being recorded, so if you don't have time to see it today, please log on to our website a little later on, and you can, right from the front page, you can see our YouTube channel, the icon. You can click on that, it'll take you right to the recorded programming. From there as well, you can also not only view it, but you can share it with others. And please do, because really what we're trying to do here, not only just with this program, but with everything we're doing from the Grief Training Center, is to recognize the good in people, recognize the power that we have as individuals, and even more so as a community when we come together, right? We're trying to equip people with knowledge and strength and confidence to be able to do more, to help themselves and to help others. It's really important work. We'll hear some of the work that is being done today from people like Carrie and Bethany, and there's many more out there, or many more like that out there, including ourselves, who aren't necessarily professionals in the arena of bereavement, but yet we can lift a hand. We can do something to help ourselves and our families and our neighbors, and then there's an awful lot of things we can do from a volunteer perspective in our own time that can really help and really improve our world, starting right here in our own community. So that's what the Grief Training Center is about. That's what we're trying to do, and that's what even this program is targeted towards. So please share it when you can. It's important work. So what I'll do now is bring on Melissa, and we'll hear from Melissa for a little bit, and then we want to really make sure that we can take time to hear from Carrie and Bethany, because they've got an awful lot of value to contribute today. So thank you very much. Melissa, hi.
Hello, Daryl.
Thank you for joining. Thank you for your time today.
Yes, no problem. I always enjoy this opportunity.
Yeah, and this this whole series is your brainchild. I appreciate the vision that you've had to really kind of hit this target for our audience, and the framework that you put together for us in order to operate and run it. So it's been great content. I know today is going to be fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So today we do want to spend some time focusing a little bit more about the roadblocks that get in the way of healing our grief. And I know we've been using the term sabotage, and that is a very strong term. And sometimes I'm reluctant to use it, but I understand that, when we don't honor our losses and we don't allow ourselves to grieve our losses, it does lead to some really destructive kind of outcomes. So I guess I use the term sabotage just to emphasize the fact that how important it is for us to have this awareness, to be aware of this, and attend to our grief. We started out, talking about all the different losses the pandemic has created for us, from, missing family vacations all the way to coping with the death of a loved one and everything in between. And we talked about how important it is to acknowledge this grief. We talked about how important it is to give ourselves permission to grieve, as well as create opportunities to mourn. So today I'd like to just focus more on about the things that get in the way of us doing our grief work. There are things that we do consciously and unconsciously that can create additional distress as we're trying to cope with our losses. So some of these ways are not fully acknowledging our losses, and not having others acknowledge them for us as well. Sometimes it's the lack of understanding grief and what it should look like. Sometimes we have expectations of ourselves, and those expectations sometimes we're not able to fulfill, and then we get discouraged. The other day I had a neighbor say to me that, she kind of asked, how you're doing so well during this pandemic. She's like, I just feel like I'm a mess, and I'm struggling, and I'm having such a hard time, but you're doing so well. And I thought to myself, yeah, no, I've had my moments, but I realized that, she was creating more distress for herself because she was comparing how she was coping to the way I was coping. And I had to remind her that, we all have to do this, and we all have to do it our way. And it really doesn't do us any service to compare to others. It really actually causes us more distress. So when we have that lack of understanding about grief and how grief should look, we really set ourselves up for more disappointment or more in just being discouraged. Another thing that we do that kind of gets in the way of us healing from our losses is that we strive to get back to the way things used to be. And we all know that this pandemic has forever changed us. We don't look at the world the same way. And so we have to create a new normal. And I'm not a fan of that, using that phrase, new normal, but I recognize that in this situation, it makes sense. I think the reason why I'm hesitant to use the term new normal is because it's hard to define normal. Normal looks different for all of us, but in this situation, it's really about being able to adapt to the changes and create, just create our environment so that we are able to feel more in control over it. So if we're striving to get back to the way things used to be, and that's where all our energy and effort is going into, sometimes actually that, once again, that's causing greater distress for us. And it's more about just trying to figure out, okay, how do we create and adapt and make changes to deal with what's right in front of us.
That's interesting when you talk about the new normal and our striving to do it. It gives me it reminds me of an experience I had just a few weeks ago. Actually, it was on a program we were running with the grief training program, and a woman, part of the program, she had described this, and this goes months back, where her husband had I think it was a heart condition. It wasn't COVID, it was a heart condition, and he had to be rushed to the hospital. And the family feared that might, he might die. And she had described how her two sons, and they were both like late teens, maybe early 20s, rushed to the hospital because they wanted to see their dad. They feared that this might be the last time they can see their father, and rushed into the hospital and try to get to the room in the wing that he was in. And unfortunately, they were escorted out. They couldn't enter. It's COVID and restrictions. They couldn't get there, and had to be escorted by security out of the facility. And when we speak about normal, here's where it struck me, Melissa. The first thing that occurred to me when I heard her describe that story was, well, yeah, of course, it's COVID. You're not going to get into the hospital. I mean, almost like, what were they thinking? And it struck me, if it was 1 year prior, if it was this time last year and I heard that story, my first thought would have been, oh my gosh, that's crazy. What do you mean they couldn't get in? What do you mean they couldn't see their father for their last time? Right? I convinced myself that normal was something that was so different and so harsh and cold. I was like, oh yeah, of course they're not going to see their dad before he dies. It struck me because that's not the type of person I usually am, but there can be a real risk to just adapting to a normal that, in this case, doesn't quite fit with compassion and doesn't quite fit with the need to outreach and connect with each other.
Yeah, and it makes it all the harder to adapt to a lot of these changes because they really do contradict really what's helpful in regards to coping and healing and being able to be comforted. So yeah, that is that is a concern I have, as well as.
And that's part of the reason we had heard from Carrie, how excited I was to hear what she's going to bring to us today, because what she and her team have been doing, still with restrictions in place, how they've been able to navigate through that, just through their own creativity and through their commitment to serve.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I'm going to take a few minutes to bring on Carrie here so we can hear a little bit of her story and what she's been doing with her team, because it's remarkable. Hi,
hello, everyone.
Hello, Carrie.
Hi, Daryl and Melissa. Thank you so much for having me here today.
Carrie, do a little bit to share with our audience, some of the stories that you shared with me and Melissa about what you and your team have been doing over the last 10 months or so to really kind of navigate the minefield and the barriers of COVID-19 restrictions, particularly as it applies to care facilities and nursing homes around the area.
It's funny, as you guys were talking about what's normal, that really struck me, because I was just thinking about, before COVID started, for the past, 9 years before that, we were able to, do everything we could to provide care for our patients and our families and support them. And all of a sudden COVID hit and everything stopped. There was a giant roadblock in the way, and we really had to identify what was going to be the most important things to do in order to support, our patients and their families, because now all of a sudden restrictions are in place and they cannot go and visit their loved ones anymore within any facility, and this is our experience within home care and hospice, as far as being in the community, assisted living facilities, memory care units, long-term care facilities. I know it's a little bit different within the hospital setting, but across the board, everything was closed. And the feelings of isolation and just the fear that everyone had, not being able to go in, whether it be their weekly visit, and sometimes for people daily, they, a husband go to see his wife, who unfortunately has to be in long-term care. And, to no fault of the facilities, they had to keep their residents safe. And this was a whole new ballgame. No one really, we were all responding, to do what was best for our patients and their residents. And, kind of where do we go from there? So I'm going to just talk a little bit about how, we responded to that for our those that we serve. And also for our own staff, because that was quite a struggle too. Those of us here at Allay, we've been here a long time. There's a lot of longevity at this company, and we're all here for a reason, because we really truly care about these people. They're, starting this last chapter of their life, and, we kind of have one shot to do it right, as best as we can, considering the circumstance, and as well as possible. So, after everything hit, we decided, okay, how are we going to find ways for these families and caregivers to be able to connect with their loved ones? Because at that time, everything was pretty much in person. And then all of a sudden we thought, well, we have to really think, how do we do it virtually? How do we allow this to happen? Now, keep in mind, even though we really know that families couldn't go in, and caregivers couldn't go in and see their loved ones, we couldn't either. Providers were really not allowed in either, because again, these facilities are really trying to keep them safe. And everything was very new. So really at that time, we had limited ability. Some of our nurses or home health aides were allowed to go in, depending on the facility and their protocols that they had put in place. So, there was one side of, for our patients, what are we going to do? And certainly trying to have virtual visits, like through, FaceTime, Google Duo. We tried everything possible, or at least we can see them on a screen. And even if that individual wasn't able to really communicate with us because of some kind of cognitive impairment, we could at least tell their loved ones that, I didn't just hear how your loved one's doing, but I was able to see them, and they looked comfortable. They looked okay. Their needs are being met, and our nurse is by their side. So that gave some comfort to them, at that time. So, and we also really tried to find ways of, we bought more tablets so that we could bring that into the facility and encourage families and caregivers to be able to log on their end. So anytime that our staff would go in who were allowed in and continue to be allowed in, because that is still, certainly a factor, could have some kind of communication. And, obviously, just to, give a lot of recognition to the facilities out there too. They certainly took steps in the exact same ways to make sure that they could do anything possible to have people be able to connect, because they weren't able to be face to face.
So, Carrie, that just listening to just some of those big steps forward, but from my family member's perspective, I mean, I just heard your story, and to feel the power of what a phone call like that would have been from you or from one of your facilitators, to be able to assure me that even if I can't see my mother or my father or my loved one, that you could, and that they're okay and they're being cared for. And I mean, that assurance is just very, very powerful.
It really, I've heard so many times, that just means the world to me. That people, even though I can't be there, and, I'm frustrated, I'm angry about it, but I understand why. They're very, very grateful just to get our call on the other end. I can tell you that the amount of time that our staff has spent on the phone, really supporting people at this time, I mean, that has increased so much, because they really want, we're their lifeline, if you will, to their loved ones, along with the facility staff, of course. And another thing that we really wanted to focus on was, with our families and caregivers, how can we provide extra support beyond what we're doing now, beyond phone calls and updates and reassurance and listening to them. And so we decided to start a virtual support group for families and caregivers that we, after the initial shock in March, organized everything. We were able to launch the beginning of May, and we did a 4-part series just to kind of see how people would respond to that, and if they found it helpful. It was kind of our time to play with that a little bit. And we found that it was very much appreciated. There was a lot of people who, really benefited from it, just being able to talk and know they're not alone. That the feelings of the isolation and just not being able to see their loved one, and that was across the board. They found that, Melissa, you kind of mentioned, your neighbor saying, you're doing so well. And I think we all have that feeling of, just as a normal person out there, not being able to go over to my parents' house. I'm not able, my kids haven't seen their grandparents, and I don't even know how long. We have to have all these restrictions on our normal day lives. Yes, imagine what it's like where not only can I not see my parents, but they are in a long-term care facility because they can't care for themselves at home, and they need more help. And now I can't go there. And maybe sometimes I can't even talk to them on the phone because they can't speak, because they have advanced dementia, so then again, that's a whole nother level, because communication, even though before they couldn't speak with you, you could at least sit in the room with them and hold their hand and be with them. So again, that's, I think just knowing that you're not alone, that was very, very beneficial. And we also were able to expand that invitation to a lot of the facilities that we work with, just to families that are in their facility, whether or not they're on service with our company or not. We opened that up because just the overall feeling, of course, whether your loved one's on hospice or home care, that doesn't really matter. We wanted to make sure to be able to support people as much as we could. And because we had such a great outcome from that, we have a caregiver support group that goes on through today. It is held once a week, and those who do attend are very, very committed. They look forward to it. They've created quite a bond with each other that is, wonderful to see, that they can support each other beyond us, being there for them. So that has been great. And, we haven't really used virtual ways of connecting. In the past, it's always very much been in person. I think we see that everywhere. But we decided, well, for those who have passed on our service, we do want to be able to, of course, support those, their loved ones even more so right now because of all that they just went through, not being able to see their loved ones maybe until days or even day of when they passed. And, that really has impacted people. And Bethany is going to be speaking more on that effect. So we also have a grief support group that we started at the end of 2020, and that also had a wonderful response, and people so appreciated that opportunity. So we are continuing that throughout the year in 2021 with one of our other bereavement coordinators.
Wow, Carrie, that just, that whole story, but particularly about the power of the caregivers coming together and bonding then together themselves. And it's an example of how something wonderful can start to form that you could never have predicted, never have planned, something that was so challenging, but you guys in your commitment and the work that you've done to be able to kind of plow through that barrier, you were able to create something that maybe on the surface seems like it was quite simple, but now look at the beauty that's resulted from it. It's just, it's an amazing example of the power of that commitment and creativity to do something beyond for the good of people. And then you can see the magic that occurs afterwards.
Exactly. And one thing that I hear over and over again is how people are feeling like all these things are happening to us, and that they feel like they have no say or have no control or aren't even part of the decision making. And you created a way to empower them and feel like, yes, you do. There are things we can do. And there are ways that you can feel more in control and being able to be part of the decisions that are being made on their behalf or on their loved ones' behalf. So thank you. Thank you for doing that.
It's truly not just a pleasure, but an honor, to really be part of people's lives at that time.
Carrie, thank you. We're going to take a few minutes here, and we'll bring Bethany on and have her join us here as a foursome, because we'd love to hear what she has to say. Bring her on here. Bethany, hi.
Hi, thank you for bringing me into this very valuable series that you're doing.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for your time. Really, I know both of you ladies are busy, so I really appreciate this, this time that we're spending together and you're carving out for us. It is great to hear the wonderful work you're doing, and hopefully we can get this message out to a lot of people. So, Bethany, tell us what you're seeing from your perspective and what's been happening.
I have the privilege of being one of the co-facilitators for the family caregiver support group that we're doing. Chaplain Gene is the lead facilitator, and he's awesome. But our members are really what makes the group. And what I've seen is that they're all grieving even while their loved one is living, because all of the members that are in our group have a loved one who is in some kind of a community assisted living or skilled nursing facility. And so they may not be able to visit. Some have not been able to visit the whole time. Some can visit here and there. When they do visit, there are restrictions. There could be plexiglass in between. They have masks over their faces. They only can visit looking through a window at their loved one. They're not able to touch them. And many have not been able to visit at all this whole time. And that's a huge loss. And I don't know how many people realized that it's a loss that needs to be grieved. I remember in the very beginning of the series, Melissa was saying that, with every change comes a loss, and with every loss comes grief. And in our groups, we're actually giving people the permission to feel the feelings, the sadness, the pain, the frustration, the fear, the anxiety with the uncertainty. They don't know when they're actually going to be able to see their loved ones again face to face. Nobody knows what has to happen before we can do that. We don't know. So we provide a safe place in the support group for them to share their feelings. Everybody is free to feel whatever they're feeling in the moment. They do a wonderful job of supporting each other. And then there's more that happens. They also come up with reasons to have hope. They talk about things that they're grateful for. They reminisce and tell stories about their loved ones. And then we laugh together. So it's just a beautiful thing to see human beings coming together in a very uncertain time to cry together and to laugh together and to have some kind of a connection. So, I don't know how many people understand how difficult it is to not be able to touch the ones that we love, especially when we know that their time is limited. And I think for every person who has a loved one in hospice, we know, soon a day is going to come when I won't be able to hug mom anymore. I won't be able to hold my husband's hand. All I will have are my memories and my photos. And as precious as those are, I'd really like the opportunity to make some new memories while they're still here on this earth. So they really, really need the support of being able to mourn that loss with others around them going through it and holding on to hope that this isn't going to last forever.
Bethany, that's such a valuable perspective that you just shared here. To think that those that we love, if we can't reach them, and we can't be with them, and we can't hug them, and we're being prevented from doing that. How that's a loss. That's grieving, grieving right now. I think of my own mother. She's still alive. She's not in a home. She's in an apartment, but she's been completely isolated. And I recall hearing from her on Thanksgiving. In fact, she drove over. It was just like small family here, and my nephew was visiting her grandson, and I've got 2 daughters, and she just stood outside, by the front door, stood there with her mask on and cried because she couldn't hug her grandchildren. And I remember her then a day or two later, speaking with her, and she said, I don't know when I'll ever be able to hug them again. I don't know if I can hug my own kids, my own grandkids. But she's alive and she's operating, but it's such a twisted perspective that's the reality that she's living and grieving that loss every day. And for me to recognize that is not just my loss, but how she might be feeling really because of that loss, that even though she's not dead, that she can't have that valuable hug that as a mother and grandmother is just, it's gold. So thank you, man.
Some of our members have found some other ways to find that connection where, they've signed a release so that caregivers in the facility can take photos. So they have the caregivers send them through text, like a photo of their mom or their spouse, playing bingo or engaging in some normal daily activities, or a picture of their loved one eating a piece of the birthday cake that all that the daughter could do was drop off the cake and couldn't even get to see mom eat it. So that the caregivers are sending pictures, and like the hospice team members, when we're there, if we're allowed in, that we can FaceTime with them, or use the tablet, and so that we can Zoom. And we still, even though we're doing these things, we don't pretend that this makes it all better. We don't pretend that this is enough. This is the best we can do right now, but it doesn't replace being there in person. So it's like other speakers have talked about, you know, you have the pain and the gratitude together, you have the joy and the sorrow together, and we want to provide that space to honor all of those feelings, because we're complete people with a range of emotions and needs.
And you're right, Bethany, when you mentioned, you know, Melissa talking in our, I think it was our first session about bypassing grief and not acknowledging our own losses, and that's the root of it. It goes all the way back to the first session, Melissa, what you were talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And so I just appreciate how creative the two of you have been, and your team has been, just to be able to help figure this out, families figure this out, and to help reassure them, and, you know, not you know, bypassing, but acknowledging, and but then also empowering, all at the same time. So thank you for the work that you do.
You ladies, you have wings on your back.
Thank you very much. You know, we're just set out here to do the best that we can, like you said, with all the circumstances, and making sure that we can, you know, I find it interesting how saddened our own staff is. Like, I can't go and see, you know, Louise anymore, you know, and she's been with us for several months, and, you know, I can't go and just hold her hand. You know, and our whole team feels that way. And then you take a step back and you think, I can't even imagine how her family feels. You know, so yes, exactly. Trying to identify everything that we can do on our end to help. I think, like Bethany said, acknowledging that what they're feeling is, you know, it's okay. You know, I can't tell you how many families have said to me, you know, it's so hard not being able to go in. You know, and sometimes, unfortunately, when their loved ones are passing, you know, they might only be allowed in one time. You know, it really depends on the situation, but, you know, we just support them and talk to them and listen, truly listen to where they're at, and validating that. I know we talk a lot about disenfranchised grief, and I know, you know, Bethany was hitting upon that, you know, with her discussion too, about, you know, the things that we don't recognize as normal grief, and how just right now that there's a lot of that going on. You know, this is not something that people typically experience before their loved one passes, when they are at least aware, you know, they're on hospice services, it's going to happen at some point. You know, not being able to be with them is definitely not the norm, like you said. And unfortunately, right now, it is our new norm. You know, you talk about that, and, you know, we just hope and pray for the time that comes again, when, you know, we can all be in there together. And, you know, I think it really gives us hope, and we look forward to not only when that time comes, but we're planning for that. And when it does open up again, you know, how much more that we will appreciate that. Excuse me, how much more our families, you know, will appreciate that, because we take so much for granted sometimes, I think, and not intentionally, of course, but, you know, truly, when things change, we will be out there that much more, and being able to do great work, you know, and for not just the patients and their families, but, you know, the caregivers and all these buildings that we go into in our community.
Wow, Carrie, yeah, it's so powerful. Like, you ladies, correct me if I'm wrong here, because here's kind of what I'm taking from this. I mean, you've all delivered big pieces to this puzzle. It seems that if, you know, the more we accept this normal and make it normal, it seems that in that case, the more we risk not recognizing the loss because of it. Like my example with the two boys being escorted from the hospital. I normalized that, and therefore I dismissed the fact that there was even a loss there, because right, it's normal. There shouldn't be a loss if it's normal. It shouldn't be anything to recognize. But in doing so, right, we disenfranchise from it. We don't acknowledge their grief. We don't validate it. We don't even create the opportunity. We deny the opportunity to even create the space to be with someone who's hurting, because we've normalized it as a non-issue. Right. I mean, am I stringing those pieces together correctly, or?
Mm-hmm. You know, when you say that, we do have to be very mindful and careful, because, you know, you can get caught up in the, well, like you said before, well, that's just how it is. That's how it is for everyone. So that must be okay then, right? Because we're all going through this, or it's the same playing field, right, for everybody. And that is so not true. We have to be very thoughtful to validate that this is not normal, that you know, really should be able to be with your loved one, you know, when times get tough, when they change, when you are aware that they're going to be, you know, leaving this world. And it's just very important to listen, you know, at that time when they have so much grief and so much sadness, to be able to talk about and validate, like I said before, and make them sure that they know that, you know what, it isn't fair. None of this is fair. You know, trying to pretend like it is would be a disservice. Mm-hmm.
Well, and I love the example of the work that you two ladies are doing, because it shows that you're not allowing that normal to set in. Okay, there's rules, there's restrictions, there's policies in place, and some of them are for good reasons, but doesn't mean that you're forfeiting. You're forfeiting because you recognize the need that there's still a job that needs to get done here. There's still real help and healing that needs to occur despite these obstacles and these hurdles. We're not going to allow that to stop us. Doesn't mean we're just going to break all the rules, but we're going to have to get creative and continue our mission forward. And that's what I think is the magic behind this whole thing, is to make sure that we just don't forfeit. Don't say, well, it is just what it's what it is, and therefore we'll just do whatever we can, or not do anything at all because we've lost. And I think both of you are resisting that, and you're showing, you know, there can be an awful lot of good from that commitment and still moving forward and doing something maybe in a different way. So I really appreciate both of you spending your time today, but I really appreciate the work you're doing. You know, and Melissa, likewise, when I think about the series, just the series as itself, in another example of just bringing this message out and not allowing the normality to set in and have this message disappear. You know, some of this stuff is, even if it's place and we think we have to now, it doesn't mean that it's normal. It doesn't mean that we should stop. We need to keep reaching out to those we love. And I think your idea for this whole series is similar to what Bethany and Carrie are doing in a different way. Bringing this out to the surface and saying, no, we're not going to stop here. We're going to continue to get this message out and remind people how important it is, and give them ways that they can help themselves and help others in their lives.
Absolutely. That was the number one thing that I wanted the outcome to be in regards to this 5-part series, is that collectively as a society, we recognize that there's a lot of grief out there, and we need to nurture it and attend to it, and be good to each other. We need to create opportunities so that people can be supported and receive the care that is needed. So thank you.
Ladies, I'm going to wrap this up now. We're running a little bit past our time, which is fine, because your contribution was fantastic. Melissa, Bethany, Carrie, thank you. Again, I'll run the ticker here for Allay. It's definitely worth people seeing. So again, for you viewers out there, check into Allay. They're doing fantastic work, as you just heard from Carrie and Melissa. And this program will be recorded on the Grief Training Programs website. I'll run that ticker for you just to remind you. There's another way you can see that. And I urge you to get this out to share to others, because we want to encourage people to kind of step forward and continue to do what the example that Carrie, Bethany, and the facilitators at Allay have been doing. There's a lot of good we can do out there. We need to continue to plow ahead and be creative and reach out to those we love and those around us that we can help. It's magic when it occurs. So thanks, everyone. I'm going to end the broadcast. You guys, please all have a wonderful day. And thank you again for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.